Good day everyone, we are the group 3 and we're gonna present to you a new lesson for today. But before that, allow me to introduce to you the group 3 members, namely Kent Roldan Abelia, Ralph Nino Adlawan, Jacob Aranas, Ryan Cañete, Christine Carcalas, Ronald Cinco, Jimena Ganuhay, Jessamay Malasa, Laika Luella Elias, Gabriel Paden, Kylie Rosa Dili, and Maria Cor Onabia.
So our topics today it's all about the spiritual self. Before we elaborate the meaning of about spiritual self, let's know the objectives first. So first, letter A is to identify the definition of the main topic, determine the various religious and practices, understand self in relation with religious beliefs, explain ways of finding the meaning of life. The question is, what is spiritual self? So let's find out. Let's find some meaningful about spiritual self. So the first meaning of the spiritual self is the spiritual self is considered as the highest self. The inner self, a person's true being that is greatly influenced by a spiritual deity. So it means that our spirit is in our faith, is in who is with this faith. Like for example, God God is our creator. So God is our creator then. So we have a faith. We have a some religious gather that know what spirit it's all about. Then this first means is was also being tackled. What spiritual self it means. It is because spiritual self it comes to God. Spiritual self may be defined that being believer, being faithful to Him, we allowed ourselves that if we died, our soul will be in Him, will be in eternity, will be in God's hand. But that's why the first meaning as spiritual self is a great, and it is the inner self, which means without spirit we can't alive. So the spiritual self composes itself that it is the most important. It is a requirements of our body to be alive, and that is the first meaning. So the next meaning of the spiritual self is it is the authentic self, the unconditioned part, the you without patterns. So being you cannot compare, you cannot invade to someone. And this spiritual self is a truth self or authentic, like the way the authentic self can't have a portion because we have a individuality, individual lives, then we alive. That's why we have a different spirit in our body. It is because we have our own unique to be in that struggle, to be in that challenge, accept the challenge, to survive, to succeed. Like like we are now, we are studied, we are study because we had a dream, we had to fight and accept the challenge, even though sometimes we ruin ourselves. There's some disadvantages we know, but be an authentic, be who you are, because no one will life be in safe, be in relax, because life is in a challenge. That's why the spiritual self is an authentic self. The spiritual aspect of the self is the inner essence, the part of the self that connects the person to the sacred, the supernatural, and the universe. Inner essence, it is a essential. It is a something that inside of the spirit what has on what was had that spirit. Spirit has a soul and mind. You know, it defines that that what inside of that spiritual aspect maybe affiliates also to the supernatural and the universe. Why we had that maybe defined also, maybe compared also the same of us, the same of life. Like for example, the universe have a life also. Then as human also, we have a life. So like that, it's being connected. The universe, the supernatural, and the sacred. Why we have that spiritual aspect. The strength of the spiritual self is determined by the depth of that person's belief. So, this is one of the major why we have. why we have to be strong, it is because we believe that we have a God in our heart and in our spirit. It is a kind of depth person's belief why we have a strength. It is because of our spiritual self. Why we have a strong emotions, strong challenges, and like for example, we must say that I know how to fight this of my challenge because I know I have a God in my soul, in my spirit. We said of that. That's one of the example is a kind of strength that we believe on him, that we have a belief on him. That's why spiritual self may be defined that who is our creator and why we must tackle this spiritual self and why we know about the religious because spiritual self it more on focuses about religious topics. Spiritual self enables the person to experience a feeling of oneness with a higher being and the universe and gives a deeper purpose or meaning of one's life. So this spiritual self, it also they had to experience what was the feeling of oneness, belongingness with this a higher being. Like as human, we are the higher being of this world. We can also we are the one who will adapt this spiritual self. Then this spiritual self, they need the belongingness of human, of the universe, and this spiritual self has also a purpose of this, a purpose of a life. They had also a meaning. Why they born, why they alive. It is because of us. The second question is, where does the self develop in? So the spiritual self develops through interaction, observation, and imitation. Interaction, it is a communication or direct involvement. So our spiritual self needs to communicate, needs to interact some others. That's why spiritual self uh, they need to adapt some other peoples also to communicate them. Then next observation, action or process of observing something or someone carefully or in order to gain information. So our spiritual self need the information to gain must also to know. And why does we had that? We had to observe that kind of information. We can't disseminate, but being unobserved. The next, imitation, action of using someone or something as a model. So our spiritual self is in need in this world as a human. Then a spiritual self has this imitation. It is because we had to practice and or exercise a lot of learnings to grow older and how we on how what and on what was the purpose of life was and purpose of spiritual was. As we see the examples of the important role of a child's spiritual development, this is a very important role of the child where they adapt a good behavior of this spiritual self in the family, school, and church. So these three can also practicing you on how developing your spiritual development. And this was also evoked to you that being a child, you had to grow in a good persevere. It is because you know that people surrounds you can take you in a direct path to learn what spiritual development it is.
From history, people's lives have been shaped by their religious traditions and practices. It says that in our history, the people is always do their religious and traditions. They don't do things that are not related to their traditions. Spiritual practices. A spiritual practice or spiritual discipline is the regular or full-time performance of actions and activities undertaken for the purpose of endorsing spiritual experiences and cultivating spiritual development. A common metaphor used in the spiritual traditions of the words great religious is that of walking a path. Therefore, a spiritual practice moves a person along a path towards a goal. The goal is variously referred to as salvation, liberation, or union. Example: light a candle and blow it out. Anoint yourself for bath. Let the wind carry away the feather, burning your worries away. The practice of religion. It is restricted more than belief, as it will affect other people. It is restricted, it can cause trouble to other people because we have a different religions. It includes worship, rites, rituals, sacrifices, festas, trances, and etc. also includes dances, meditations, celebrations, matrimonial, and etc., as provided by human culture, which is considered as sacred by the practitioners depending in the belief. Examples is norm wine or wine and incense stick. One's identity or spiritual self tied to the center of their religion and worship, Christian, firmly believes in the man who was created in the image of God, Genesis 1 verse 27. For them, everything else is immaterial for as long as we follow God. He is the all-knowing, all-God, Alpha and Omega. He is also God and Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Christians refers to the follower of Jesus Christ who may be a Catholic, Protestant, Mormon, or follower of another branch of religion. They were called Christians because their speech and behavior were like Jesus Christ. Muslims. The name Muslims itself means one who surrenders and submits to Allah and His laws. Their God is the Allah. He was the one who showed Muhammad, the founding prophet, the message. Jesus is not considered as the Messiah, but one of his prophets who was shown one of the Gospels. Muslims are monotheistic and worship one all-knowing God who in Arabic is known as Allah. Followers of Islam aim to live a life of complete submission to Allah. They believe that nothing can happen without Allah's permission, but humans have free will. Buddhism and Hinduism. Man's goal is to reach nirvana, that is the removal of desires and sufferings. A major difference of Hinduism and Buddhism is the belief or lack of belief in a soul. Hinduism believes in the concept of a soul. Buddhism, on the other hand, there is no belief in the concept of soul. Meditation practices increase positive emotions which may yield positive consequences for life satisfaction. Prayer is one of the things that help us get rid of our emotions. We need to pray to be guided in the right path and give positive consequences in our life, and it helps us bring the righteousness. Research has also shown that when facing trials, greater religiosity predicts greater subjective well-being mediated by greater social support and meaning in life. Research has found that a person facing his or her ordeal has benefits to be gained. Spiritual self and coping stress. Every individual has a spiritual belief and practice that create a pattern in their lives and set the standard for one's morality. One's belief will not be necessarily reflected in the action of that person, and sooner or later, the person will have to choose between the two, either to abandon the belief or to change one's way in order for it to be consistent with the belief. One of us have a spiritual faith to make a pattern in our lives. We set a standards for our morality. Our faith not based on our action because someday we will choose between two options, either to abandon the belief or you can replace your faith to be in line with our faith now. Example of spiritual belief is we believe in witches and ghosts, or many children believe in Santa Claus. According to Dr. Saples of Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research, spiritual people engage in practices that can help reduce levels of stress. Miller K. 2020. It has been observed that spiritual people are more likely to help the poor through donation or volunteer work. They are also involved in community service. According to Dr. Sipples of Stanford University Center of Compassion and Altruism, the person who has a spiritual belief are involved in things that can help them to reduce the stress. They also observed that spiritual people prefer to help the poor through donation or volunteer work. They are also involved in community service. Spiritually active people cope with stress through meditation rather than overeating or engaging in unhealthy coping behaviors. The people who are active in spiritual can handle with stress through our meditation rather than keep eating or you engage in bad activities. Spiritual people have a very high regard to prayer. Meditation provides benefits such as focus to decrease pain and depression together with improved health and happiness. Religious people choose to spend quality time with family, and they feel a strong sense of belonging to a community of like-minded people. The religious people is choose to be with their family, and they can feel the strength that seems to exist in the community as they have the same thoughts. Prayer helps people find comfort by assisting them in dealing with difficult emotions, encouraging forgiveness, and leading healthier relationships. Prayer can help us to have a good life. Like we are in a part of difficult to control our emotions. We have anxiety and depression. Forgive the people who sinned against us and guide the person to the right way of relationships.
So, according to Meller K 2020, further positive emotions, increasing level of psychological resilience, and improved immune response have all been associated with spirituality. Spirituality is not a simple subject for experiential study. Spirituality begins at an early age but develops throughout life as people continuously interact in the environment. Spirituality, the root meaning of spirituality is taken from the Latin word spiritus. Spirituality can be understood as the search for the sacred, a process through which people seek to discover, hold onto, and when necessary, transform whatever they hold sacred in their lives. Spirituality generally refers to a meaning and purpose in one's life, a search for wholeness, and a relationship with transcendent being. Then, spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that this there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experience, and that the greater whole of which we are part is cosmic or divine in nature. It is actually a complex system that requires serious and dedicated effort. Nevertheless, considering the positive correlation between spiritual, physical, and psychological well being, health experts and practitioners can undeniably include spirituality in practice in order to help patients recover from their illnesses and have a happier and longer life.
Starting your own spiritual journey. People worldwide have diverse religious views and practices. The decision to seek spiritual enlightenment is driven by the innate need for meaning. Joining a spiritual groups helps people find meaning in their lives. Through the spiritual groups, people find connection in troubling times. The connection group helps ease their stress and their depressive symptoms and increase their immune response. With these benefits, it is essential for us to start embarking on spiritual transcendence. Miller 2020 proposed a simple guideline on how to start with our spiritual journey. First, start small and make new habits easy. We are not allowed to strictly follow a set of beliefs overnight. Spiritual journey is a process and it is progressive. Becoming spiritual can be as simple as staying silent for 5 to 10 minutes a day in a peaceful environment. Second, commit. It is a matter of perspective. Decide to start and continue with your spiritual journey. Begin with self-love, with growing measures of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and gratitude. One can start being more spiritual right away if you have these measures. Third, practice. Just keep on doing and progressing. Human beings must continue practice mindful attention to their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to form experience in spirituality. Fourth, study. Explore and relate with others' experience of spirituality, whether through religion or personal journeys. Seek advice and guidance from people who have been through the same path. Last but not the least, choose love and respect. Commit to loving and respecting yourself above all else. Then do it with others. If you truly accept your own strengths and weaknesses, you can easily and unconditionally offer love and respect to others. Even in awkward, conflicting situations, choose to remain calm and interact with compassion and grace. Spiritual self defined as a way to put a label on how we see ourselves. This is an important idea in recovery because our sense of progress in this area is based almost entirely on self-perception. It is essential to nurture the spiritual self in order to live a happy and thriving life. As Planty said about the importance of nurturing the physical body through diet and exercise. But the spiritual body is often forgotten or ignored. All of the aspects like mental, physical, emotional, and especially spiritual must be acknowledged in order to maintain overall well-being. You can be the healthiest person but still feel like something is wrong or experience illness, both mentally and physically. That's why the emotional and spiritual well-being have deep influence that trickles down into and impacts the mental and physical body.
So that would be all, and we hope that you have learned something from it.